Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast. FYI, I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Welcome to the show. Where do we draw the line on freedom of expression? Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. Here it is Thursday night at approximately 8:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on August 31st. And coming up, obviously, Friday, September the 1st. And here we are going into the Labor Day weekend, which is really hard to believe already. It just seems that we're going into the May 2-4 weekend in the beginning of summertime. Well, it's still officially summer. But school is back in, starts September the 5th. Public schools, Catholic schools, high schools, college, university. School buses are going to be out in full force. And so are the children. So it's time to pay attention. Get into the routine of putting your phones away while you're driving. Slow down in the school zones. Follow the rules of the road. Now, I've been out here from time to time and talked about, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Where do we draw the line? Who should be held accountable? Social media outlets like Twitter, TikTok, even on here. Even on Podbean doing a live cast, or maybe do a recorder cast. I don't know. So the Charter Rights and Freedoms is one of the most recognizable parts of Canada's constitutional democracy. It was signed in 1982 under the Trudeau administration, not the Trudeau administration today, 1982, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. And then following the extensive negotiations, the Charter of Rights and Freedom provides legal protection for citizens, rights to free speech, religion, and freedom from discrimination by limiting government power. And though people living in Canada are largely able to enjoy the rights and freedom guaranteed by the Charter. But there are also clauses that also allow some of those rights and freedoms to be violated in certain circumstances. In particular, there are two sections of the Charter. Section 1, the Reasonable Limits Clause, and Section 33, the Notwithstanding Clause, that creates space for governments to violate some of the terms of the Charter Rights and Freedoms, which are then validated or not by the courts. Well, not the withstanding clause. See, the premiers across the 10 provinces and 3 territories wanted the notwithstanding clause, just in case there was something in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that they didn't like and they wanted to change it. And then the only way they could change it, they'd have the notwithstanding clause. So Section 1, the Reasonable Limits Clause, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in this subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Now, when a government in Canada makes a law that violates the terms of the Charter, our court may say that doing so is legitimate, so long as the violation occurs in ways that are a reasonable limit that can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Okay. So we had to put limits on gatherings over the pandemic. Well, we had to shut down non-essential business, shut down schools. That's not the federal government. That was the provincial government. The top doctors in each province actually took charge. And so then the premiers would have to come out and say, we have to close non-essential business, we have to close schools, we have to have stay at home orders, because of the spread of this virus, COVID-19. Now, the Supreme Court of Canada developed a test in its landmark case of R versus Oakes to assess what constitute a reasonable limit. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Where do we draw the line on freedom of expression, freedom of speech? And of course, when it comes to everybody, when it comes to, okay, so the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, not everybody. There are people out there that think that, what's written in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is written in stone, and that the government can't alter or change anything in the Charter, when in fact they can, as long as they can demonstrate such reasonable limits prescribed by law. So the Supreme Court of Canada developed a test in the landmark case of R versus Oakes to assess what constitutes a reasonable limit. That involves a two-part to determine whether legislation violating the Charter can be justified under Section 1. So they had this two-part formula with three justificatory criteria to weigh the balance of power between the law in question and individuals' freedom and rights. So the first part of the test asked two fundamental questions to establish the connection of the case to use the Charter, effectively determining whether the limit on freedom is reasonable. So after the first part of the test is established, the court must engage in the second part of the Oakes test, that is identifying whether the reasonable limit can be democratically justified in three ways. First, the aim of the law or policy under scrutiny must be rationally connected to the limit of the Charter right. Second, the limitation must restrict the Charter right as little as possible to a minimal impairment. And third, there should be an overall balance of proportionally between the benefits of the limit and potential harmful effects. Now, this is one that is a really argumentative one. The notwithstanding clause. Now, this was so little history of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It was rewritten in 1982 under then uh, Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau, which is Justin Trudeau's father, which Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister of Canada at this present time. So the premiers want to put in this notwithstanding clause. So the Parliament of the legislator of the province may expressly declare in an act of Parliament or in the legislator, as the case may be, that the act or provision thereof shall operate notwithstanding a provision included in Section 2 or Section 7 to Section 15 of the Charter. Now, so the notwithstanding clause states that both the federal and parliament and provincial governments can enact legislation that violates some of the rights and freedoms of the Charter in certain situations, particularly where governments disagree with potential or actual judicial decisions. When a government invokes the notwithstanding clause, then the legislation in question and the use of the notwithstanding clause must be reviewed every 5 years. That means that it's notwithstanding. So, I mean, you can't even, if they change something in the charter, if the premier changes something in the charter, it can't be challenged in court. And it stands for 5 years. I don't know, where people just think that, yeah, we got rights. Nothing can change that. We got freedom of speech and expression and so on. We can say whatever the hell we want, when in fact you can't. Section 1 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it says that your charter and rights or freedoms are not absolute. So I want to bring up this little topic here because when it comes to freedom of expression or even freedom of speech, you may have heard of Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a prominent clinical psychologist. He's written a bunch of papers and books, and he taught in universities and also practiced clinical psychology. The first thing I heard about him is that, I actually came across it by accident. I was just perusing through YouTube and it came up, and the subject was gender pronouns. I thought, what the hell is this about? So obviously it had to do with the LGBTQ plus two spirited people and gender pronouns where they wish to be addressed instead of using him or her or she, man, woman. And that was, something that, Jordan Peterson absolutely refused to address. Call somebody by their preferred gender pronoun. So that kind of got him into a little bit of trouble, but it doesn't stop there. You probably know who Elliot Page is, also known back when she came out as trans as Ellen Page. Is an actor. And she had surgery done. And then Jordan Peterson was all over that. You know, his comment was, do you remember when pride was a sin? You know, so after the surgery and everything took place, and she come out and she talked about it, how great it made him feel. And then again, Jordan Peterson, gets bent out of shape once again and ridicules Elliot Page. So when we talk about pride, so he says matter of fact, pride is a cardinal sin. Well, you can break that. You can break down. You can break down pride and how do you want to decipher it. So so the sin of pride, according to the Bible, the sin of pride is a heart attitude expressed in an unhealthy, exaggerated attention to self, an elevated view of one's abilities, accomplishments, position, possessions. So was Elliot Page when she comes out and says, "Wow, this transformation makes me feel really great." I don't know how that would be, according to Jordan Peterson, a sin of pride. So we can look at pride once again. Maybe you take pride in the work that you do. Maybe you're an artist. You like to draw. You like to paint. Uh, you like to do crafts. Music. You take pride in music, right? You're an artist. You write music. You write lyrics. You play it. You sing it. You take pride in that. Would that constitute as a cardinal sin? Probably not. And then we just take pride in ourselves. Well, we take pride in the way we look. We take care of ourselves. Men with short hair, women long hair. We take pride, people, you go to the dentist twice a year to get a cleaning and a checkup, and you got nice white pearly teeth. And you take pride in that. You take pride in your home, the way you take care of it. the way it's kept on the outside and the way it's kept on the inside. That's not a cardinal sin. But it is when you think you're better than everybody else. And you're out there shedding it out to the world. And you're drawing attention to yourself of all the accomplishments and all the abilities that you have and the positions that you've done and all the possessions that you have. And it's like, you can't have any of this stuff because I'm better than you. I don't think Elliot Page was actually even doing any sort of thing like that. But not according to Jordan Peterson. But it doesn't stop there. He comes across a photo of a BBW woman in a swimsuit magazine, and he says, not pretty. No authoritarian can even change that. And other remarks that he made about the pandemic. He criticizes the government a lot. Now, we can criticize the government. As long as we're not threatening. He's criticized the government umpteen dozen times. It's not threatening. It's not calling the prime minister like really bad names. It's not threatening to harm. But he's been in the hot seat, with the governing body of psychiatrists. And because some of his remarks that he has made, in particular with Elliot Page, the government, and this swimsuit model, a BBW, that he has been found guilty of, I guess we could call shaming. To a degree. So when we have doctors or lawyers, school teachers, premiers of the provinces, anybody, in an official occupation that deals with public all the time, that higher hierarchy, so we hold them at a different standard. So, the end of the day, Jordan Peterson has been ordered by the courts to pay $25,000 in a fine. And he's also been ordered to take a social media sensitivity program. Now, he's fighting this all the way. He said he's going to take it to the Supreme Court of Canada, in which, by the way, the Supreme Court of Canada doesn't even have to hear the case. So who gets away with what? If I said the same things that he was saying about Elliot Page, or what he said about the plus size model in the swimsuit edition on social media, people would get upset. See, he got banned from Twitter. This is before Elon Musk took it over. He got banned from Twitter with his remarks regarding Elliot Page and the plus size model, and whatever else he says on social media. So he got banned from Twitter. And then Elon Musk buys Twitter. And then he changes it to X. Then he tells Jordan Peterson he can come back onto Twitter. He tells Donald Trump they can come back on Twitter. Well, we know Donald Trump's nothing but a liar. Jordan Peterson, well, should he know better, being in the prominent position that he is, a clinical psychiatrist? I mean, you don't belittle your patients. Another thing that came up yesterday too. So when it comes to your freedom of expression, this just happened the other day. This happened in the Bruce County here in Ontario. So the mayor who resigned, he apologizes for his ignorant, insensitive comments about First Nations. But first, I mean, you have to stick your foot in your mouth first, right? When you speak something, when you say something about somebody, or or a certain group, and you speak before you think, and once those words come out, you can't take it back. So this is what he had to say. This is a 43-second clip of this mayor. He's heard talking about the plant that opened in Cape Crocker 25 years ago. He claims the plant was ruined because community members didn't maintain it, and questions the $65 million spent to set up a new hydrant and water plants. And 75% of those houses, he says, they should be torn down, he said in the recording. It's like, why are we spending $65 million on water treatment plants up there that's going to last 20 years because they're not going to look after it? Just look at their homes. I can understand to be poor, but you can be poor and clean. Well, he resigned before he got fired. Now, if that were me or you or anybody else, I mean, if you said that on social media platforms, directed at the indigenous community, well, maybe Elon Musk probably wouldn't ban you. Probably not, because he likes to have people on there like who would say shit like that. But other platforms would probably ban you. But so he apologizes. He apologizes for his ignorant and sensitive comments about First Nations. Maybe he shouldn't have said anything at all. Sometimes if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything. Was he exercising his freedom of expression? Oh, not likely. So the fundamental freedoms in Section 2 of the Charter, Rights and Freedoms, everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press or other media communications, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. So, under the Section 2 of the Charter, Canadians are free to follow the religion of their choice. In addition, they are guaranteed freedom of thought, belief, and expression. Since the media are an important means of communicating thoughts and ideas, the Charter protects the right of the press and other media to speak out. Our right to gather and act in peaceful groups is also protected, as our right to belong to an association like a trade union. So these freedoms are set out in the Charter to ensure that Canadians are free to create and express their ideas, gather to discuss them, and communicate them widely to other people. These activities are basic forms of individual liberty. They are also important to the success of the democratic society like Canada. And in a democracy, people must be free to discuss matters of public policy, criticize governments, which Jordan Peterson does all the time. I mean, Pierre Poilievre of the he's a conservative leader of the Conservative Party in the federal government. He criticized the government all the time. Every single day he opens up his mouth. Somebody who I wouldn't vote for because he has no general direction of what he wants to bring Canada forward, but only just to criticize the federal government in the moment. Now, so even though these freedoms are very important, governments can sometimes limit them. For an example, freedom of expression may be limited by laws against hate propaganda or child pornography because they prevent harm to individuals and groups. Section 1, and this is one thing people you can't skip over it, right? You can't. So, and it says that your charter rights and freedoms are not absolute. And you can't pick and choose a charter that just explicitly just is for you. Yes, of course we can go out there and we can show our discourse of the government in protest. But there's rules of engagement. It has to be peaceful. You can't intimidate and harass and prevent other people's movements and their rights. You can't do any of that. We have the right to live in a peaceful neighborhood. For an example, back in January of 2022 into February, which started out as normal as a protest starts out. It's not the first time trucks had gone to Ottawa. I think it was like 2018. I think like 100 trucks went to Ottawa from Alberta. And they stayed the weekend, had their protest, and they left. Just like when we have a discourse of the government, you know, generally, if it's with the federal government, they're going to go to Ottawa because that's the capital. And they're going to protest there. So things all start out as, the the rolling protests, so all these trucks heading from all parts of Canada and everything to ascend on to Ottawa for a protest, and like any protest in Ottawa, because there's been hundreds of them. So even, the mayor of Ottawa, the police chief of Ottawa, the RCMP, CSIS. Oh, this is just going to be your average Joe protest. They'll come here and blah, blah, blah. They'll say their piece, demand stuff, and then go home. Little did anybody know, never mind the police services or any other Canadian, what was to happen next was that they would just lay siege on the city of Ottawa. Using vehicles as barricades, intimidating and harassing citizens. And this took place. I'm not making this shit up. The air horn blowing day and night. That's intimidation. That's harassment. That's just violating all the bylaws of noise. The partying all night. I mean, you can't even do that. If you have a big party in your backyard and you're loud and you're disturbing the neighbors, you're soon going to get a knock on the door by the police. They're going to tell you to turn down the music. And don't make them come back a second time. People out there, they can say whatever the hell they want about that so-called Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. I call it the Karen Carnival. Being a trucker for myself for 30 plus years, I know that you'll never be out of a job. As the truckers out there who are in the protests and stuff like that claim that it's the government's fault they can't work, which is just bogus. Because if you have a commercial driver's license, there's no excuse not to work, and there's no excuse not to have a job. You can work domestically. So when it comes to that part of freedom, freedom of thought and belief, opinion and expression, because you can't intimidate and harass people verbally. Oh, and he got on the backs of the LGBTQ plus two spirited. You know, I mean, he seems to be upset that you know um, they dedicate a month to the LGBTQ. They have their gatherings, they have their parades or whatnot. So he's expressed his opinion about that. And so the governing body of, of doctor psychiatry now says, and the courts have said, that he has to take social media sensitivity training. Maybe he feels he's being picked on. He's rebellious. You know, the tweets that he made about Elliot Page, he refuses to take them down. He says he's gonna fight it tooth and nail. He's gonna fight it to the bitter end. You know, right to the Supreme Court of Canada, which he has the right to do. Fight it for as long as it takes. I mean, he doesn't care. I mean, he's got the money. He can hold out just as long as anybody. You know, who's well off. I would just say this. I mean, for but I guess trying to shaming for one. A plus size woman. She's a model, and she's in the edition of the swimsuit magazines. To say not pretty, and no totalitarian can ever change that. I think that's shaming. That's I think that was kind of like over the top. So in the governing body of physicians here in Ontario, said, okay, you know what, enough's enough. First of all, you're supposed to be professional. You hold a clinical psychiatry license. Whether he teaches it anymore or he sees patients anymore, that's all irrelevant. Now, if he doesn't see patients anymore and he doesn't teach it anymore. So then why don't you just retire your license, but it still doesn't give you the right to shame and ridicule just because he may think it's distasteful of a plus size model in a swimsuit. I actually saw the photo. Actually, she's very beautiful. And I'm just thinking, what's his problem? What's his problem with the LGBTQ? Having a month dedicated to them. What's his problem with Elliot Page? He seems to have a real serious problem with Elliot Page. Then I'm watching other people. So people on the Daily Wire and stuff like that. Americans trying to I guess comment on Canada's Charter Rights and Freedoms when, first of all, read the goddamn thing before you comment on the Charter Rights and Freedoms, because there are limitations. And your Charter Rights and Freedoms are not absolute. It's just like when the federal government invoked the Federal Emergencies Act. Jordan Peterson just about went off the edge. Oh, they can't do that. Well, a lot of people said they can't do that. News stations down in the United States, like NBC. Oh, that's authoritarian government. They can't invoke that. They can't do that. So Jordan Peterson thinks that he can invoke the Federal Emergency Act. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, first and foremost, right? Trudeau just doesn't just stand up and say, I'm invoking the Federal Emergencies Act. It's got to go through a vote through the House of Commons. So from the Conservative Party, from the NDP Party, from the Quebec Bloc Wall Party, the Green Party, the Independents, I'll have to vote on it. So they voted yes. Invoke the Federal Emergency Act. Oh no, you can't do that. It kind of irks me in the way too when people weigh in on something they know nothing about. And how and when the Federal Emergency Act can be invoked. And one of them is public disorder. They made it very clear during that time back in January and February, they made it very clear that they were going nowhere until all mandates were lifted. Here in Ontario, so, March of 2022, but don't forget that ran for 3 weeks. So that ran right from, I think, the last week of January right into like almost into the third week of February. It ran for 3 weeks. It's going on for 3 weeks. So when do you know you've overstayed your welcome? When people have had enough, people are fed up. You made it very clear that you weren't leaving until all mandates were lifted, and starting in March, I mean very early March, here in the province of Ontario, the mandates were starting to be lifted. And by the way, at that time, we could all go to work, businesses, even non-essential businesses could open. Now, so like I say, I mean, these people on Daily Wire and other news agencies in the United States and stuff like that, just about losing their mind. Back when the federal government invoked the Federal Emergency Act, you know, first of all, they obviously don't know anything about Canada. Secondly, they know nothing about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Thirdly, they don't know anything about the Federal Emergency Act and when it can be used. See, the Federal Emergency Act replaced the War Act. The War Act was actually used by Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. I think it was around 1970 or 71 or 2 and around there. So serious conflict that was going on in Quebec. And then, he actually even used the military. That was then the War Act. So that got all changed in the 80s. Changed it to the Federal Emergencies Act. And then put in the new guidelines. Now, I think I could probably pull it up here pretty quick. Now, what they can do, I think it's on this one. It has to be on this one here. When it can be used for, it can be used for terrorism. It can be used for war. It can be okay. So the Emergency Act, which replaced the War Measures Act in 1988. So the Emergency Act has never been used. The War Measures Act was under Pierre Elliott Trudeau. But the Emergency Act, when it was revised, and then so revised in 1988. So the War Measures Act, however, has been used 3 times in Canadian history: during the First World War, the Second World War, and then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau during the 1970 October crisis in Quebec. That was under the War Measures Act. So the Emergency Act was the first time that it has been invoked by now Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So and of course, with any threats to democracy and safety and wartime or whatever the case may be. And of course, with what was taking place in Ottawa last January and February. Now, I mean, it already has been, you know, it's not written in stone, and so they have the inquiry, which they did, and after the inquiry, um, it was said that um, the federal government met met everything that was needed to invoke the the Federal Emergency Act. So, of course, coming up, I think September the 5th, two of the organizers of that so-called trucker freedom protest, they're headed to court starting September the 5th, and I think it's supposed to run for 16 weeks. And they are up on several charges. So I'll have to see how that turns out, and follow that, and because you know one in particular, Tamara Litch. I mean, she's been traveling around and talking about her experience, and the government invoking the Federal Emergency Act, and she's the only one actually that has she's written a book on her experience with that Freedom Convoy and how it empowered her and how it changed her. Well, good for her. I wouldn't give her one dime for it. And of course, she had that really big interview. Oh, matter with Jordan Peterson. Actually, interviewed her, and I watched the video and actually did a show about it too, and she doesn't seem to have learned her lesson. You may or may not know she already did a little bit of time in jail. And at the end of the day, that could probably be her the outcome of everything. That she may not be. I don't think so. I don't. My opinion is that I don't think that she'll get any more jail time. She may get a monetary fine, but she's not gonna get any more jail time. It'll probably look at what the little bit of time she did in jail, was probably punishment enough. Have to wait to see what happens. I mean, I'm not the judge. So after the 16 weeks, I don't think their trial is going to be going for 16 weeks because there's like 5 other ones, I think, organizers also will be appearing in court. So I think over the 16 weeks that they'll all have their say in court. Not to find out. But so anyways, thank you for joining me this fine Thursday. And of course, this weekend is Labor Day weekend. Kids are going back to school. Tuesday is going to be chaotic. You're going to have, I'm talking about the public school kids. They're going to be excited. They're going to get back to see their friends and their teacher or teachers. We as drivers of our automobiles, we need to slow down, pay attention, follow the rules of the road, follow the school zone speed limits, and put your cell phones away. There's nothing worse than hearing of a child being hit because someone passed a school bus, someone speeding through the school zones. It would be parents dropping their kids off and getting themselves to work. Like, summer vacation is done. So we need to be alert. We need to be alert anyways on our roads and highways. Whether it's summertime or kids are on summer break or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. In the city where I reside in, is going through neighborhoods, and they got the public schools there, and they got the school crossing sign, and they got the speed limit sign underneath that, and it says 40 kilometers an hour, which is like 25 miles per hour, right? That's not just for when school is in. That's sign to say, yeah, there's a school here, but that's the speed limit 365 days a year. And a lot of the neighborhoods, also all the adjacent streets coming off all the main arteries and stuff like that, all those speed limits have been reduced. It's not just certain times of the year. Oh, it's only 25 mile an hour through the school zone when school is in. No, it's 365 days a year. That's why they're putting more speed bumps in neighborhoods. So people slow the hell down. And of course, it's going to be a really nice weekend, weather-wise. So whatever you have left to do over the weekend, I mean, people are going to be heading up to cottage country. For one last hurrah of the summer holiday. And then they'll be going up periodically just to bring stuff back, because you imagine every weekend you're bringing stuff up there. You leave it there, you got tons of stuff at the cottage, and you got to bring it back home again. So it's even going to be a busy weekend of traveling for people who go to cottage country. And of course, over this long weekend and stuff like that, the police forces all around Ontario and every city and municipality are going to be on the outlook for aggressive driving, speeders, not wearing seat belts, distracted driving. I didn't mention impaired driving. They'd be looking for that as well. So they'll be in full force. If they haven't started that already, I'm sure it'll be starting tomorrow because tomorrow's Friday. Maybe you're getting off work early. I don't know. Try to beat rush hour traffic. The highways are going to be packed. And then our roadways are going to be packed coming Tuesday. School starts. Pay attention. So everybody can get to where they're going safely. Including yourself, of getting yourself to the office, getting yourself to whatever job you're going to do. It's not a race. So I guess until tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, I'll join. Hopefully you can join me tomorrow night. And since Monday is a holiday, I probably will do a Monday morning show because I'll be off that day. And I'll just have like a leisure weekend, but I will do a show tomorrow evening. About 9 p.m. It'll probably start between 9 and 9:30 because it's the weekend anyway. And that show will be up after this show is all finished and it gets out there. So if you can join me tomorrow night, that'd be great. If you can't, I understand. And the same thing for Monday morning, September the 4th. I'm not sure what time that one's going to start, but the show will be posted up for Monday, probably sometime, or Saturday, sometime during the day or evening. I'll post it up for Monday morning. So if you're following me, you probably get some sort of notification that Truckers Podcast has an upcoming show, such and such date and time. So then, I guess till tomorrow evening, take care. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the long weekend. Take care and be safe. And thank you. Take care.